Welcome to Amazon Unpacked, the podcast Amazon doesn't want you to listen to. This is our very first episode, and I am one of today's hosts. My name is Ira, and I'm a longtime Amazon warehouse worker.
And I am Brandon. I basically just got here. Been with Amazon for 9 months, and it's been a journey.
It has.
And I'm Cowboy. I work at AWS, and as a tech worker from the other side, I'm here to ask a lot of questions. But before we get into that, let's set the stage. So today we're talking about safety. So what does that mean?
Amazon claims that our safety is its top priority, but the numbers tell a completely different story. Investigations have shown that we already know Amazon is perfectly happy to sacrifice our health and safety to boost its productivity.
You talk about how Amazon is trying to prioritize safety, but then these numbers show a completely different story. So like what kind of numbers are we talking about? Like it can't be that bad, right?
It is actually that bad. Uh, Amazon workers seriously get injured at least twice the rate of normal warehouse workers in the
Okay,
industry.
so
Wow.
this is an actual statistic from actual studies saying that Amazon warehouse workers get injured at twice the rate of other warehouse workers. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Amazon is obsessed with speed, which is one of the primary cases of the high injury rates.
Hmm. And I feel that for sure. What are some other statistics?
They also vowed to cut its injury rates in half, but it has actually gone up.
Wait, when did they say they were going to cut their injury rates in half, and what happened?
In 2020. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember reading about Amazon's injury rates way back in 2019 and 2020. So you're saying they said they were going to fix it, and their injury rates have still kept going up.
yes, yes.
But are these like I stubbed my toe type injuries? Like,
Oh, there are actually more severe injuries.
Damn. So you have more injuries than any other company in the industry, like double. That's not even like a little bit more, like double, and they're like worse injuries. So Amazon is really number one, but pretty much only in not giving a shit about its workers.
Amazon is number one.
We got all the numbers, we got all the stats. I want to hear about the juicy stories. So you talk about how Amazon's top priority is really focusing on safety of the workers, but even from those numbers alone, we can tell that's not true. But what's it like in the warehouse? What are the secrets?
I mean, I'll tell you one story. First off, it's obvious that Amazon prioritizes speed. We didn't need a report to tell us that. But a pretty obvious example of this is that they don't even let us know what the safety guidelines are, right? You would think if they cared about safety, they would tell you what they considered safe to be. Um, so I've asked for like a printout or some access to safety guidelines just so I know how I should be working. And management's like, oh, it's on your A to Z app. A to Z is this app that, it's like a Amazon dashboard that employees have. So I'm like, okay, I go on my A to Z app and I look for safety guidelines. And I find a file called safety guidelines, but it's locked. I got to be VPN'd into the network, meaning I've got to be management to access it. So I go back and I go and talk to one of the higher up safety people. I'm like, hey, I've been trying to access the safety rules. I want to know what it means to work safe here. And they're like, oh, well, you just got to go on A to Z and get it. I'm like, I tried that, but it's locked. I can't access it. And they're like, oh, okay, well, just try again. I'm sure, just try it connected to the Wi-Fi here. I go on again and it's still locked. Recently, I go on to check just to prepare for this show to see if it's still locked. And now there's no file on there at all, let alone a locked file. I can't even find a file that says anything about what it means to work safe at Amazon. So they say they prioritize safety. If they know what that means, they're certainly not telling us.
Curious.
I mean, I've got a challenge for management. If you're so worried about safety, show us what the safety rules are. And I know what one safety rule is because once someone who was a higher ups told me that it's actually a rule. It's a safety rule that if packages fall off the belt and land on the floor, we are allowed to, we're actually supposed to turn off the belt and clear the floor, clear it of tripping hazards, put them back on the belt before we turn it back on. And I know Brandon's got a story about that.
Yeah. I actually got a stern talking to because I turned off the belt. So I was picked to buff, and I was the last person. I had the last 3 or 4 hours, and
Which is a
we were
lot,
just
by the
getting,
way.
yeah,
Fucking 4 aisles.
we were just getting flooded from a lot of missed packages and just people just missing in general. So there were, I would say, maybe about 50 packages on the floor. I couldn't access any of the aisles that I was supposed to um, pick to. And so I turned off the belt. And within a matter of seconds, they turned it back on. So I turned it off again. And they turned it back on. So we just kept going in that cycle for about maybe, I'd say about 5 minutes until someone actually came over and asked what was the issue. So I looked at him and I said, there's a ton of packages on the floor. And uh, they told me uh, to go take a little walk and then come back while they clean it up. And I did that. And then when I came back, they the manager at the time, she came to me and said, what was the issue? And I told her, and then she continues to say, well, you can't just turn off the belt if there's a few 1 or 2 packages on the floor. So I said to her, I said, it was more than 1 or 2 packages on the floor. I even showed her a picture that I took. And she said, well, I wasn't there, so I don't know. But, we can't just turn it off whenever we feel like. So yeah, that was a interesting um, conversation we had.
Yeah, and the crazy thing too is like I know working outside the warehouse, Cowboy, you don't know what 4 lanes is, like picking 4 lanes. But we also we know what we need to be safe. We know that having us pick 4 lanes is too much. Packages are going to fall off. That's too much for one person to handle. We're going to be dropping packages, keeping up. We're going to be tripping. We're going to be exerting ourselves. These are 10, 11-hour shifts, right? Like it's insane. But the thing is they keep doing this thing where they overwork people, and then they send out a lot of what's called VTO. And VTO is voluntary time off. People can, I'm exhausted, I'm going to pick up that VTO and go home. And they get taken off the payroll, they go home. Voluntary, you're not paid. And so that means, all right, there were 10 people on this belt. Now there's only 8 people on the belt. So who's going to pick up the slack? All right, it's going to be the guy at the end of the belt. And so now he's working twice as hard, or 20% as hard. And then half an hour later, they'll send out another wave of VTOs. They'll be like, all right, let's get another 10 people off the payroll. People are exhausted, so they're going to take that shit. They're going to take that and they're going to go home. And now, okay, the people who are left are doing twice as much work as they were at the beginning of the night. And they say, safety, but then they keep having us do more and more and more work, and they act like we're idiots if we say, oh, only 3 lanes is safe. Or 3 lanes is safe. Anything more, that's starting to be too much of a strain on my body. That's dangerous.
For a person, they would be a gaslighter.
I think that's the word for that. Brandon, do you want to talk a little bit about why they VTO people?
Well, I heard it's so they can get their bonuses at the end of the quarter.
I think about it is if Amazon, if DBK4, that's a warehouse we work in, if DBK4 has shown that they can run the operation with 110 people, the higher ups are going to be like, all right, good job. You ran it with 110 people. For the next quarter, see if you can run it with 100 people. Mm-hmm. So now Amazon's going to be sending out 10 additional VTOs each night so that they can figure out how to do it with 100 people instead of 110. Once they figure that out, they figure out how to like have us working, picking up the slack of those 10 less people. Then they'll be like, okay, we figured out we can run it with 100. Let's cut those people permanently, or let's, due to turnover, now the workforce has shrunk anyway, let's not hire more people. That becomes the new baseline. Well, that's 10 people they just took off the payroll permanently. And that money saved, that extra money that Amazon makes by working the rest of us harder, Amazon kicks down a certain portion of that to the managers who are able to make the operation work with less people. And then, but that's a new baseline. They're like, okay, you ran it with 100. Now let's see if you can do it with 90 for this quarter. If you can prove you can do it with 90, you're working those 90 harder than they were before, you're making that much more money. We'll kick a share of that money down to you as well in the form of bonus. Not, mind you, those 90 people who are working harder. We're not the ones who get the bonus. It's the managers who are VTOing people as part of their quarterly productivity bonus, or however frequently it is. They change the exact structure around, right? It's not always the same thing, but each time they get a baseline, and that's the new thing that they've got to push below by making the rest of us work harder and VTOing people, and then cutting people off the payroll permanently.
Yeah, and I mean that can only last for so long, because at one point you're going to get down to such few people that it's going to become so unsustainable. What's up with the headphones? Like, you're working 10, 11-hour shifts, you're not allowed to listen to anything, you can't, use the rhythm of the music to keep you motivated? Like, what's the deal with that?
Well, our warehouse has come a long way in terms of listening to music. When I first started, I believe everyone had their own individual speaker, they would listen to. And then after a while, they implemented a speaker system, and anyone can request a song. That didn't work out too well, because we would spend the entire shift listening to one genre of music sometimes. But
I feel like people requesting music actually made it worse, because like the process of actually requesting the songs is like a pain in the ass. You have to go find this like obscure QR code somewhere in the warehouse that's not always in the same place. It's like a freaking Easter egg hunt just to request a song. So only like a handful of songs end up getting requested. So then they play this really mad short playlist, and you hear the same songs over and over and over again.
What's the worst song you've heard?
That's too controversial. I can't.
yeah. One shift I was unloading and I hurt my wrist. I don't know, I was lifting up the box and then I felt like a pop. And then I told them, and they basically they got safety. They took me upstairs to a room where they contacted another person that works that's a safety I don't know, operator or whatever, but she has like a medical background. So I spoke to her. She asked me a bunch of questions. If I can make a fist, if there's like pressure or anything. And then they pretty much gave me an ice pack and sent me on my way. And then the next day, they put me to push packages.
It really messes with your wrist.
Yeah, you basically, yeah. So from unloading to pushing packages on the belt, I had to use my injured wrist.
Yeah, and they'll like, you can technically like get accommodations where like if you get a doctor's note that says, oh, can't lift X amount of pounds or whatever, it's kind of up to their discretion. They'll like try to put you in jobs that you can do. But the thing is, the managers don't communicate to one another who has accommodations. So they'll like, one day you'll be fine, and then the next day you'll have a new manager and they'll put you doing something that your doctor's note says you can't do. And it's like these new managers, they just won't believe you when you're like, I have an accommodation, and they'll be like, oh, well, you got to get a doctor's note for that. I got a doctor's note for that. Oh, well, I didn't see the doctor's note. and you're stuck doing the shit work. And then you got to go through the whole rigmarole to make sure that now this manager, you got to make sure they know you've got an accommodation, but it's too late, you've already been working half the day. And if you injure yourself, you can go home, but you're losing pay, or even losing UPT, the allotment you have of amount of time you're allowed to miss before you get fired. And then the other thing is, they don't even have to give you an accommodation. They can just be like, oh, it's too hard for us to accommodate you, so we'll just put you on an indefinite unpaid leave.
Wow. And then how are you able to come back?
I had a back injury a couple years ago, about a year and a half ago, and I got it from Amazon, but I didn't feel it until I left Amazon. Like I came home, and so I was doing very strenuous work that was hurting my lower back. Your lower back always hurts at Amazon. And I get home and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna like force myself to exercise a little bit to get my body back in doing the motions it should be doing. So I go down to do a couple push-ups, and immediately my back just seizes up. It starts spazzing out. So I used some of my paid time off the next day, and I went to the doctor. She wrote me a note, and she's like, oh, you've developed sciatica, and you just had a back spasm and all this shit, and you can't lift, like you can't go to work. She wrote me a note. So I got it excused. I got some, I had to jump through a bunch of hoops, but I got a little bit of medical leave. But the medical leave didn't kick in until I'd been gone a week, and it only paid about half of my paycheck. So I was gone for 3 weeks, and I got only 2 weeks of half pay for that. And then when I tried to come back, my doctor wrote out an accommodation, what I was allowed to do, what I wasn't allowed to do. And I brought Amazon the paperwork, and they're like, this isn't good enough. You need them to fill out our official forms. And then, so I bring it back, and my doctor fills out the official forms, and I bring it back, and they're like, oh, well, we don't have anyone who can accommodate you. And I talked to another manager who knew me well. I'm like, that I can do induct, I can do problem solve, I can push. And I just named them off. She's like, I know you can do those, but it's HR who makes the decision, and they don't know you. Like they're not here on the floor. They don't see how this stuff works. So they were going to refuse my accommodation and either make me work all the stuff that my doctor was saying I couldn't work, or make me go on a permanent leave. So in order for them to put me back on the schedule, I had to go get my doctor to write another note that was a clean bill of health. They wouldn't let me come back to work until I got my doctor to give me a clean bill of health, and I knew that my back was messed up. And I'm not the first person that's happened to. I know at least 2 or 3 other people who have had that same exact experience.
Yeah, that's crazy, because I feel like if you feel bad or if you feel injured, you shouldn't have to think twice about going to the doctor. And then on top of that, feeling bad and recovering from an injury is already so difficult, than to have to go back and forth between management and the doctor so many times. Like, that's just a mental load that nobody wants to deal with. So it's clearly not a very effective safety measure. There are clearly no policies. There's clearly there's no flow chart, right? Like there's no oh, do you feel like you've hurt yourself? Have you hurt yourself? Here are the things that you need to do. Sounds very very hectic, and if anything, just prone to more injury.
Whatever happened to us stretching during stand-up? That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's the other thing. They hold this meeting.
We have a stand-up meeting every morning where we discuss the stats of the previous day, the top inductors, stowers, whatever. And during this stand-up, we usually have stretches that we do, that everyone is supposed to do to prepare them for the shift. That was a thing when I first started, and it slowly disappeared. And now they just have like a board that just says you have to do stretches, or was it take little breaks in between or something like that?
Oh yeah, we're allowed to take breaks in. Yeah, right. And actually one of the safety, they have this like safety committee that's just your like regular tier 1 associates, and they just apply to be on the safety committee, and they think they're joining it to like do good and help like make the workplace more safe, but they have no power to enforce anything. It's just for show. And like one of them was telling me the other day, he's like, we're told in safety that the purpose of these stand-up meetings is to get everyone stretched out and do all the things that are going to help us avoid injury. He's like, that as soon as we get a lot, we've been high volume lately. We've had a lot of volume to deal with. What's the first thing that gets cut? The stretches and the things preparing our bodies for the work.
Which is kind of ridiculous because like you would think that they would want to invest in people's safety just so that people wouldn't get hurt and people wouldn't have to leave. But there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, clearly. So what happens then if somebody does get injured? What do you all recommend is the best course of action?
First, stop working immediately and find a manager. Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, one thing people don't realize is the National Labor Relations Act, it actually gives us the right to refuse unsafe work. We have the right to refuse unsafe work. Even if we just think it's unsafe, we have the right to refuse it. That's protected activity. Even if you're refusing it by yourself, if that work isn't safe, you have the right to refuse it. Secondly, if you get injured at work and on the spot, stop everything immediately and report it. Because if it happens at work, you're legally entitled to collect workers' comp. Amazon has to pay into workers' comp insurance. So that means, you get your doctor's note and they pay you to stay home, essentially. The problem with that is you have to go to Amazon's special in-network doctors. You have to schlep into Manhattan from Queens on a day that they schedule for you. It's extremely inconvenient. And I don't know, I think these doctors are like on Amazon's payroll or something, because half the time my doctor will tell me one thing. They'll be like, oh, you definitely can't work. And then the Amazon doctor is like, oh, you can work. You're just fine. Right. Mm-hmm. And these are the doctors you got to go through, according to them, to get workers' comp. Although legally you can go to your doctor to get workers' comp. So the first thing is, if you get injured at work, file a report so that they can't say, oh, that didn't happen at work. If it happens at work, you're entitled to workers' comp. Don't let them trick you into not filing a report. File the report if it happens at work. File it with HR, file it with management, whoever you got to file it with. The second thing is, it was like my back injury. It happened at work, but I couldn't pinpoint a time where it happened at work. Amazon will try to argue that it's not their fault. So if you can't pinpoint a time and place that it happened at work, they'll be like, oh, you injured it working out. You didn't injure it at work. You injured it climbing your stairs. Who injures themselves walking upstairs unless they just came out of this like brutal job? But they'll try to say, no, it wasn't us. You injured yourself at home. So if you can't pinpoint a time and place that it happened at work, you can still, through the state, get medical leave. It's garbage. It doesn't kick in till a week into your injury, and only pays you at around half of what your paycheck would be, but you can get that. And then the other thing is, go to your doctor and get an accommodation, and just be on Amazon's ass about it. They're gonna make you, they're not gonna tell the new wave of managers about your accommodation, and they're gonna try to get you to do stuff that your accommodation says you can't do. Just be persistent. And it's all messed up, right? Like, this is all messed up. We shouldn't have to do this. But those are like the basic remedies if you get injured at work. The real remedy is, for us to get together and fight back, force them to, listen and make changes.
Yeah, there's definitely the actions that you can take in the current moment, but there's also the actions that you can take in a much longer moment.
Yeah, so the other thing, the only way that workers have ever been able to change these types of conditions, like everything I just described, is if you get injured, what's your legal remedy? But we don't want to be getting injured at work in the first place. We don't want to be getting injured at work in the first place. We want them to prioritize safety, and we know what we need to be safe. We know how much work is safe to do. We can't let them tell us, oh, 4 lanes is safe, whatever. So the real solution is organize, fight back, and force them to change their ways. And that's the only route forward to make these types of changes anyway. Because none of this stuff they're doing is illegal. None of it's illegal. So it's just a sign that they've got more power than us. They've got the power and we don't, so we have to listen to them. So if we get organized, we can change that balance of power. And fortunately, Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act, it gives us the right to organize. They legally cannot retaliate against you for organizing to improve your workplace. Safety is one of the main things that we need to improve in our workplace, right? So if we're organizing to fix that, that's protected concerted activity.
Oh yeah.